everyone, my name is Keely. Welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. Now, I am not what I would call a seasonal reader. I will read anything at any time of the year, but I know a lot of people are seasonal readers, so I have come up with a list of books that I really love that I feel like give me fall vibes. So if you like fantasy, horror, thriller, adult, young adult, middle grade, historical fiction, I got you. So first I'm going to start with adult horror, and the first book I have to talk about is probably my favorite book of all time, and that is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grodin. Now this is set in the 90s, and we follow a group of housewives, and they are kind of bored with their lives, so they have a book club where they read true crime and horror and all the creepy spooky things. When one day a new man moves into the neighborhood and they believe he is a vampire. I love this book so much. This kind of opened up the world of horror for me that I just really dove headfirst into. The vampire part in this book is incredible. The gore I loved so much. It does get gory, but I just really love that. So I highly recommend this. So the next book is The Shadows by Alex North. Now we follow a man named Paul who 25 years earlier was friends with this little boy at school named Charlie. Now Charlie was kind of sinister, and it turns out he murders one of their other friends. So when Paul grows up, he just wants to get away and forgets about his past, but his mom gets sick, so he has to move back to his hometown that he just wanted to forget. When he moves back, people start getting murdered again, and they believe it is a copycat killer. Now this book also involves lucid dreaming, which is so fascinating. I am really into dreams, and I had never read a book that involved dreams so heavily before, and I just loved that aspect. Also, when I was reading this book, it was fall in my head. I don't know if this book was actually set in fall, but in my head, I pictured it in fall. But I highly recommend this one as well. Of course, I highly recommend all of these. So of course it wouldn't be a fall recommendations video without recommending some Stephen King books. Now I have two to recommend to you that give like absolute fall vibes. They are not my favorite Stephen King books, but they give fall vibes, so I had to recommend them. And the first one is Pet Sematary, and this one is actually my dad's copy from like the 80s, but this is a lot of people's favorite Stephen King. It is not my favorite, but a lot of people love it. If you haven't heard, this involves a cemetery where if you bury something in there, it comes back to life, but not in the same way, and it gets sinister. It's Stephen King, it's horror, it gets dark, but yeah, this one is actually really dark, and Stephen King himself says that this is his darkest book to date, and he didn't want to publish it because of how dark it is, but his wife encouraged him to, and now it's a lot of people's favorite. And the next Stephen King book is his vampire book, and that is Salem'S Lot. So we follow a man named Ben who grew up in this New England town, and he had kind of a traumatizing time there, so he is now moving back to write a book about his childhood trauma there that happened at Marston House. Now Marston House is kind of a like spooky manor, and anytime there's a spooky house involved, you know I am there. The next book is Into the Drowning Deep by Shauna McGuire. This is the first horror book that truly freaked me out. I don't get scared or creeped out easily, but this one actually involves water horror. And although it involves water, it still gives me fall vibes because it creeped me out. It really, really did. I don't like water, and they go deep in the water. So if you don't know what this is about, it's about killer mermaids. So we follow a girl who is part of a documentary team. She's actually like a marine biologist, and so she goes with this team to find out what happened to the first team they sent. So they originally sent a team to make a documentary, and everyone on that team died, and they don't know what happened. They got this mysterious video, and it kind of looked like there were mermaids, but that can't be real. Like, mermaids don't exist. So the second team goes, and they quickly find out killer mermaids do in fact exist. And the last adult horror book I have is Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez. Now, I recently read this book this summer, and I really, really loved it. So it also gives summer vibes, but because it's like a slasher, I just feel fall in this. So this is set at a cabin in the very secluded woods in Pennsylvania, and there is a cannibalistic killer that is killing everyone that is there. That's kind of all you need to know. We follow multiple perspectives, so you get a lot of different viewpoints. You get viewpoints from people that are murdered, you get viewpoints from college kids that are there to party, you get a viewpoint from the killer, and you get viewpoints from somebody that is there to make a documentary about the creepiness of the cabin. So I'm going to move on to young adult fantasy, and I have two books for this category, and the first book I have is Jacoby by William Ritter. This is the first book in a 4-book series that I completed this year. So we follow Detective Jacoby, and this is set in the 1800s. but Jacoby is not a normal detective, he is a paranormal detective, and in this city he hunts and investigates paranormal creatures. It is so funny. There is a mix of Stalking Jack the Ripper and Sherlock Holmes, and I just absolutely loved it. His assistant actually comes over from Europe, and her name is Abigail, and people kind of look at her weird because women in this time didn't really hang around with a strange man who is talking about paranormal creatures that don't exist. I had a great time reading this, and I absolutely love Jacoby as a character. And the last book in the YA fantasy category is All of Us Villains by Christine Lynn Herman and Amanda Foody. I read this book this year and absolutely loved it. So this is set in a kingdom where every 20 years the blood moon rises, the blood veil falls, and the tournament begins. So we follow 7 different families, and each family gets a champion to put into the tournament to the death, and the winner of the tournament gets the high magic for the next 20 years. Now, I really love anything that has to do with a tournament, especially like a magical game where they have to fight to the death, and this did it so well. And the way that the magic system and the kingdom was described just gave me such autumn vibes, and I think this is a perfect fantasy book for the fall season. Now, moving into middle grade, I have one book to talk about, and I feel like it's a pretty obvious book, but that is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I love this series so much, and this was actually my first book from this author. So we follow Cassidy Blake, who is a young girl who actually had a near-death experience one time, and ever since then she has been able to see ghosts, and she can cross into the veil and follow the ghosts. Her parents are also paranormal investigators for a TV show. So this book actually takes place in Edinburgh, Scotland, and the atmosphere of Edinburgh, like, tell me I'm wrong, it is fall. Edinburgh is fall. I've been to Edinburgh in the spring and it is fall. Like, I'm not kidding. This is such a spooky, fun middle grade that I just really loved, and the ghost aspect was really cool as well. Moving on to adult thriller, I have The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. Now, I think all of his books would be perfect for the fall time, but I recently read this one and it is the most fall out of all of his books. So we follow actress Casey Fletcher, who her husband has recently passed away, so she is grieving by turning to alcohol, and she kind of gets involved with the scandal, so her family sends her to the family lake house to get out of the limelight for a while. While she is there, there is another couple that lives across the lake, and they are kind of famous as well. And the wife, Catherine, is in the lake one day, and Casey notices that Catherine is drowning. So Casey goes and saves Catherine's life, and they become quick friends after that. Catherine kind of says some suspicious things about her marriage with her husband, and one day Catherine goes missing, and Casey tries to figure out what happened because she thinks the husband did it. I love this one, and the way that it is set on the lake in the fall time, it is just perfect. Riley Sager's descriptions are amazing, and his plot twists get me every time. The next adult thriller is another one of those where any of these books from this author is perfect for the fall, but this is the most fall of his books, and that is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. So this is actually kind of like a dark academia story. Don't really know what dark academia means, but this is described as that. And we follow a psychologist who her niece is away at college, and her niece's best friend gets murdered. So of course this aunt goes to the college and decides to investigate, and while she is there, she meets the professor that is very suspicious and kind of has this cult following around him of young girls at the college that are called the Maidens. I love the atmosphere. Once again, all of these books are super atmospheric, and I feel like that's what fall reads really are. This was super fast-paced. All of, or both of Alex Michaelides' books that I've read are very fast-paced, and I can't wait to read more from this author. I just feel like he just gives the perfect vibes, and it's just so fast-paced, and I absolutely love it. So the one historical fiction book I have on this list is Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Grodin. Now this is book 1 in a duology, and this is actually what would happen if Hitler had won World War II. And so in this world, Hitler won, he has taken over, and there is actually a motorcycle race every year where the winner gets to meet Hitler. And so we have a girl that has entered the motorcycle race, and she pretends to be a boy so she can win this race and kill Hitler. I love this one so much. I love historical fiction, and this is done in such like a fast-paced way, and it's really cool because it's like an alternate reality historical fiction, like what would have happened if Hitler won, but he is evil and people still want him dead, so this teenage girl goes and takes her chance and tries to kill Hitler. I love this one so much. And the last category is young adult horror. And for the first book I have to talk about, I haven't really heard anyone talk about this book, but I really enjoyed it when I read it, and that was One Was Lost by Natalie D. Richards. Now this is set in a forest, so I feel like that's fall vibes right away. They are on a senior camping trip, and when a flood happens, they get separated from the rest of their group, and spooky things start happening. They quickly realize that they are being drugged, they are being stalked, there is writing on their arms, their stuff is being stolen, and it's just really creepy because you have no idea what's going on. You don't know who's chasing them, you don't know why they're writing on their arms, but something is about to go down and you just keep reading to figure it out. The woods atmosphere just added so much to the story, and I highly recommend it. The next book is one of my favorite young adult horror books of all time, and I have not heard a single person talk about it, and that is The Companion by Katie Allender. So we follow Margot, and Margot is an orphan, and a lot of people think that Margot is very lucky because she gets adopted by the rich and prestigious Sutton family. Now, she moves into the Sutton house to be a companion for the Sutton's daughter, Agatha. Now, Agatha is very ill, so they think having a companion will help heal her. And of course, the Suttons live in a gothic manor. You know where this is going. So Margot quickly finds out that the Suttons may not be what they appear to be, and there are some creepy things going on in this house. I love this book. This is kind of the first book that introduced me to the creepy manor trope, and I have completely been obsessed with it ever since then. Honestly, if you like Mexican Gothic, I definitely recommend this book because I liked it even more than Mexican Gothic. But yes, please somebody read this. I don't want to be the only one that loves it. The next book is a book I recently read and absolutely loved, and it actually takes place on Halloween, and that is How to Survive Your Murder by Danielle Valentine. So we follow high schooler Alice, and her sister decide to go to this party on Halloween night, and Alice's sister Claire ends up being murdered at this party. So now it's a year later and Alice is still grieving, but the trial is coming up, and the day of the trial, she hits her head, she wakes up, and it is a year previous and her sister is still alive, and she has to find out how she can keep her sister alive. And so she's going through the night, but because her sister is now alive, several other people are getting murdered because the murderer was never stopped. I love this book. This is a slasher book, and I have recently realized I love slasher books, and this one is done so well. It actually brings up a lot of darker topics that I haven't really seen a whole lot in YA, especially YA horror. Now, I will say a lot of these topics weren't resolved in the way I necessarily wanted them to, and the ending of this book is not my favorite, but I still loved this book so much that I can't not recommend it for fall. And the last book I have for you is Hotel Ruby by Suzanne Young, and all you really need to know about this is the inside flap says, "Stay tonight, stay forever." So this involves a very spooky, creepy hotel where some strange things are going down. This actually reminds me of a young adult, The Shining by Stephen King, and I thought it was done so well. I read this a few years ago and I still remember it, and I'm just like, I remember being just like so like shocked when I finished it. It also kind of reminds me of that scene in Percy Jackson where they go into the hotel and time is passing and they don't even know it. This also involves grief. The main character's father is dealing with grief, and so she's actually having to go live with a complete stranger that she matched with through DNA because her father just cannot handle having to take care of someone right now. I really enjoyed this one and I highly recommend it. So that is it for my fall recommendations. Let me know if you have any recommendations for me for the fall season. Obviously, I love a variety of genres, so I will take anything. But that is it for this video. If you have made it this far, go ahead and leave the falling leaf emoji for fall, obviously. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, all my social media links will be down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye! I forgot to show you my shirt. Look, it's cute little spooky skeletons. Cute!